Howdy, my name is montze.t, and this is my response for CRE 5, and I will be doing option 1 today. So when focusing on how violent crime and terrorism affects our lives in society, I think it's important to highlight what the factors are and the different ways on knowing the influence that it does hit to the target audience, which is, us as a society. So by starting off, what factors influence my perception of violent crimes and terrorism? I think the biggest influence in my life, and with not just within violence and like terrorism, but I think just any general news, is social media. I think that's just become a generalized form within this generation of a way of just communicating things and for people to understand or see things that are across the world. And so when focusing on the course media of Denzel James, the violence in the age of social media, I think that him highlighting how our generation having several platforms and how we tend to just get information and directly just interpret and hold, and we don't go to search and see if it's right or not. And I think that has a big factor into, yes, the influence, but also the reality of what is true and what's not. Because I think there's a lot of quote unquote fake news, which we've sort of discussed in lecture, but not really. And so, that being said, how does violent crime and terrorism affect me mentally or emotionally in my day-to-day life? So, I would say around like 2020 to 2022, being in high school, there was like, it was the upbringing, or not really upbringing, but it was when, back to the social media aspect, that there were school shootings happening all over the country. And it was really starting to not only scare me myself by going to school, but also my parents were living in fear that letting their children go to school was now a danger. And so when focusing on the deadliest mass shootings are often preceded by violence at home, that article by Gu Jackie within our course media, I really liked how he was in the article discussing how when focusing on the actual rates of the people or shooters who go to schools and tend to, inflict violent crime on others, even if they don't actually shoot them, it it shows statistically that this character is upbringing from home, that this isn't something that just is, you know, developed in a day-to-day life. More so, it's created psychologically through something they've been through. And so, that being said, emotionally, it's kind of like, well, I don't really know what someone's going through at home, so I can't really know if, my partner to the right is in a psychological state where they want to do harm to my peers and everyone around me. So, that being said, continuing into the third question being, what solutions do I support to reduce the intention of killing in America? So that's where I would like to start focusing on more so gun control and what that affects within our society. And within the lecture of October 28th, we discussed how gun control isn't just because we're offering guns within the country, but more so the people we're offering the guns to. And although that, yes, it might play in jeopardy with the Second Amendment of like, everyone's right to bear arms, I do think that there has to be a certain cutoff for that jurisdiction of who really is mentally stable to be having guns within our nation. And going into lecture of October 30th, the veil of ignorance. When Professor Hernandez discussed the veil of ignorance, I personally carry that with a lot of things, especially regarding violent crime, because there are situations where I'm like, well, that couldn't like really happen to me. Like, yeah, that's happening across the nation, but will it really ever happen to me? And honestly, I think going back to discussing mental health and how a lot of the deadliest mass shootings are often made by people who are having violence at home, one never knows. And I think that just inflicts a lot with the theory of the veil of ignorance. And so, regarding that, what obstacles stand in the way of this implementation? So, in my opinion, I think that before someone's allowed to obtain a gun, they should endure psychiatric confirmation that they are okay to obtain a weapon that can cause great harm to people around us, because then this causes a lot of disparity and a lot of, going back to the social media track, a lot of influence of what America can and is, because now we're just being seen as a nation who, you get to carry your gun around and swing it around and no one really cares because that's your right. But I think that there's a lot more that we need to truly just narrow on and play more of a role as a society, and that goes to our lecture on October 23rd, where Professor Hernandez discussed the role we play as bystanders. I think that if we as a society have power to speak about something, that we should be implementing our voice to make a change and help those around us overall. So that's my response for that. And so then comparing my first interview and my second interview, I think they both have a really great correlation between what they see, and both of them correlate to more so gun control and shootings. And I think that's more so the biggest idea we as college students have regarding crime and terrorism, because it's the closest and nearest situation we are subjected to, since we are in that vicinity, and that's where we see it the most within social media, that it's targeting universities, it's targeting schools. And so I personally agree with both of their responses, and they honestly sort of submerged both of their responses. And I think that if anything, their only difference response was Veronica focused more on mental health and psychiatric evaluations, compared to Avalon, who was just discussing the different types of mechanisms that implementing new laws would cost the nation economically. So that's it. Thank you.